Sir Christopher Chope. He believed implicitly this was a work event, and you believe him.
Well, I accept his apology, which was an abject apology, and he was essentially asking for forgiveness. And it's quite clear that some of my colleagues are not as forgiving as others. But I would suggest that what we should do now is wait until the outcome of the inquiry and find out what the facts are, and then pass a final judgment then.
I mean, that's what he's been saying all along. But you say an abject apology. I certainly didn't hear it as such. I thought it was, frankly, insulting to my and every other voter's intelligence, and indeed MPs like yourself, for him to have gone from a situation where he was saying he didn't know anything about any parties and he was outraged at the thought there had been any parties on other occasions, to saying that he couldn't answer whether he was at this party or not. We'd have to wait for Sue Gray, to now saying that yes, he was at this party, but only for 25 minutes, and he didn't realise it was a party. He thought it was a work event. Even if it was a work event, even if there hadn't been trestle tables full of booze and food brought on the instruction of his own principal private secretary, as we understand there was, and we understand there's photographic evidence of this that may or may not be coming into the public domain soon, even if that were the case, that work event was still illegal under the laws that he brought in for the rest of us. So it's not really good enough, even if you accept that he's apologising and accept that he genuinely thought it was a work event. Even that event was illegal under the laws he'd imposed on every other person in this country. Why is that acceptable to you?
Well, you're passing judgment. You decided that you don't accept his apology, and that's
no, I'm saying even if you do accept it,
that's Julie, that's you're entitled to that opinion. And obviously, there are a number of colleagues who take a similar view, and a large number of members of the public. All I'm saying is that I think if somebody makes the most abject apology I've ever heard in the House of Commons in over 30 years in the House of Commons, that I accept it at its face value. I also recognise that when we get the report, there will probably be a lot more questions to be answered, and hopefully some that will be that clarify some of the issues, and particularly the involvement, I think, of the civil service in this, because if the Prime Minister didn't know about this party until he was invited into it very quickly, then surely we should give him some credit for saying he was absolutely wrong not to have called the party off, not to have told people to go back to their rooms and all the rest of it. He made a major error of judgment. He's accepted that. He's apologised for it. And all I'm saying is that I think reasonable people will say, in those circumstances, we will forgive him for this for the time being until we find out whether there's any more to come out, or whether actually there isn't.
So we're blaming the civil servants now, and I believe they're equally to blame. But again, they're not accountable to you and to me. And civil servants do what they're directed by their political masters, who are elected by us. They don't get to make the laws or decide the laws. They just are supposed to enact them. If it was a work event, why was the Prime Minister's wife there?
Well, I don't know whether the Prime Minister's wife was there.
The Prime Minister's wife was there. We understand there's photographic evidence of that. And the Prime Minister has not denied that his wife was there.
No, okay. But before we get on to that, let's make it quite clear. I'm not blaming the civil service, and nor is the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister made it quite clear that he accepts a full responsibility for it. But if we're working out, trying to evaluate the extent of the blame and whether or not we are prepared to forgive the Prime Minister for what is obviously a very major error of judgment for which he's apologised, we need to, I think, see the full facts. Now, you are prejudging that. That's your prerogative. But all I'm saying is that, for my part, I'm going to wait and see the full facts before passing final.
I'm not prejudging. I'm making a judgment based on the facts that we currently already know and what he himself admitted. Now, he was in his own garden. He's allowed to go into his own garden at any time. But I imagine that my defence, if I'd had 30 or 40 people with a trestle table full of booze in my garden and I'd said I thought it was a work event, I doubt very much the police would have believed me. And I think I would have faced a £10,000 fine. But the issue isn't really so much that there was a party. I don't think anyone died or was hurt or anything happened terribly as a result of this. The key issue here is whether we've got a government, a Prime Minister, staff in number 10, whether they are political appointees or civil service, who think that there should be rules for the rest of us, but not for them. Because meeting up in any capacity that was not absolutely essential for work, and the Prime Minister's own words said he thought this was a thank you event, a work event, that was not allowed. It was explicitly not allowed under the laws which are affecting everyone else's, not just their work lives, but their social lives. I wasn't allowed to meet with my own mum in my own or her own garden at that time. Oliver Dowden, the then Culture Secretary, was on our television screens just a few yards away from the number 10 briefing room an hour earlier, reminding us of these rules. And yet there were 30 to 40 people in a garden with booze in the garden, in the Prime Minister's garden. It's not prejudging to point out that what he has admitted to himself was already known by him and everyone in the country to be an offence.
Well, you've drawn up your charge sheet, and indeed all the matters to which you refer are the cause of distinct amount of anger across the country, which the Prime Minister recognised. Yeah. And for somebody like me, I find it incomprehensible, basically, that this took place at a time when the Prime Minister was and all his team were telling us to do the things of which you've just reminded us. So the Prime Minister is in a very difficult position, and he comes to the House of Commons. He makes an abject apology, and we know that there's going to be an inquiry. He didn't say yesterday he wasn't going to resign. He said, please wait until we've got the result.
So he's bought himself some time, hasn't he, with the Sue Gray inquiry, but also, of course, the 5th of May local elections. A lot of people have got their eyes on. It was very noticeable how quiet the backbenchers were behind the Prime Minister yesterday. Of course, wearing masks, couldn't really see people's expressions, but also stony-faced cabinet members. Took a very long time for a lot of members of the cabinet to start tweeting their support for the Prime Minister. And Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, I think it was about 8 hours for him and Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, who considered to be the front runners. We see Labour now 10 points ahead in the polls. 66% of the public the other day calling for the Prime Minister to fall on his sword over these revelations. At the end of the day, you know as well as I do that Boris Johnson is very popular with a lot of Tory voters over the years. He's been very popular with a lot of Tory party members. But there's no love for him within the party, other than for that he is a man who can win votes and win elections. If he no longer is an election winner, will he be toast?
Well, I think we'll need to hope that the inquiry comes out, reports very quickly, within the next few days, because we can't allow this to continue. And I don't think that the public want this to continue. They want it brought to a conclusion. And that's all I'm saying. I said, let's wait and see this report. Let's hope it comes out very, very quickly. And then the Prime Minister will take a decision about his own future. I think it's much better that he should take that decision himself. Then I'm sure that everybody will respect his views about it, or I hope they will.
Have you ever been at a party that you didn't realise was a party?
Well, Julie, you're asking me. No, I haven't. It's a short answer to that. And,
is the Prime Minister uniquely stupid that he's unable to tell what a party is?
Well, I'm not going to say that he's stupid, but I think he's already admitted a monumental lack of judgment in relation to this whole episode, and he said yesterday that he should have called it off, never allowed it to take place, and all the rest of it. So the issue is not about his culpability, but the question of whether or not we should exercise forgiveness for what he did. And that's where the jury's out on that issue.
Isn't the real issue here, though, crucially, is that there were rules being put in place for everyone else, unable to sort of, go to their loved ones' funerals, see loved ones before they died, meet grandchildren, kept people's businesses closed, or children not at school, playgrounds were padlocked shut, for goodness sake, at this time. Isn't it the fact that we had those rules on us at a time when the Prime Minister and his staff, whether they thought it was a party or a work event, whatever it was, they thought it was perfectly okay for them to all meet up in that garden and all stand around and chat with each other? Or sit around and chat with each other. Oh. That was against the rules. But they made that rule, they made it illegal for us to do it because it was so dangerous. We'd all die of COVID, basically. And we had to obey those rules for the good of everybody. And yet they did it anyway. Doesn't that tell us that they imposed rules on the rest of us, which they knew were not necessary?
Well, I agree with you, because I voted against those rules.
Yeah.
I was one of the people in the House of Commons who voted against those rules, and I don't think anything that's happened since shows that those rules were justified. And that's why it is all the more alarming that the people in charge were ignoring those rules, having made them. And as you rightly say, it's open to the comment that they themselves didn't believe that those rules were necessary, and that it would have been much better if we'd left these issues to people's individual judgment and take responsibility for their own lives, which has been my proposition throughout. So
on that, we will end with a note of agreement on that then.